I am Madeline Peterson, 27 years old, and 3 months ago, I moved back into my childhood home after losing my job. What started as a temporary stay turned into an artistic prison sentence when my parents suggested I paint a mural in their basement to keep busy. That unfinished concrete space became both my canvas and my cage as a simple project morphed into an elaborate landscape covering every inch of wall. With each brushstroke, my resentment grew alongside the realization that this was never about helping me. The revelation I discovered halfway through changed everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my parents and the path my life had taken. Before I get into the full story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button and stay until the end to see how this basement project ultimately set me free. The email arrived on a Friday afternoon. We regret to inform you that due to company-wide restructuring, your position has been eliminated effective immediately. Just like that, after 4 years at Wilson Design Associates, I was unemployed. The tech company that made up 70% of our client base had pulled their contract, and the domino effect was swift and merciless. 20 of us were let go that day, our personal items packed in cardboard boxes and carried out under the pitying gazes of those who survived the cuts. My apartment lease in Chicago was ending in 3 weeks, and with no income and dwindling savings, I made the call I had hoped to avoid. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice brightening when I told her I was considering coming home for a while. "Oh, Maddie, your father and I would love that. Your old room is exactly as you left it," she said, which wasn't exactly comforting given that I had left it when I was 18. A week later, I pulled into the driveway of my parents' colonial-style home in Mapleton, the small Midwest town where I grew up. The maple trees that gave the town its name were just beginning to show their spring buds. My father, Richard Peterson, emerged from the garage in his perfectly pressed khakis and polo shirt, looking exactly as he had when I left for college 9 years ago. "There's my girl," he said, wrapping me in a hug that smelled like aftershave and the faint hint of pipe tobacco he still enjoyed on special occasions. My mother, Eleanor, appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. She had been baking, probably her famous cinnamon rolls that she knew were my favorite. That first week was pleasant enough. They asked polite questions about my job search, offered suggestions for local companies that might need a graphic designer, and gave me space when I needed it. But as the days turned into weeks, I felt the familiar sensation of being under a microscope. The subtle comments began. "Still in your pajamas at 10?" My mother would ask as she passed my room, where I was actually working on my portfolio. "Those design websites won't find you a job, Maddie," my father would say when he saw me researching trends and updating my skills. The comparisons to my brother Nathan, the successful lawyer who had fulfilled all their expectations, started creeping into conversation. Nathan was saying they're looking for someone in their marketing department, my mother mentioned casually over dinner one night. Not as good as being a lawyer, of course, but it would be something stable. It was after a particularly frustrating day of rejection emails that my father first mentioned the basement. We were sitting at the dinner table, the remains of my mother's pot roast between us. "You know, your mother and I have been talking about doing something with the basement for years," he said, cutting his meat into precise squares. Never seemed to find the time. The Peterson basement was a large, unfinished space with concrete walls and floors. My parents had occasionally mentioned renovating it into a rec room or home office, but nothing had ever come of it. "What were you thinking of doing?" I asked. Not particularly interested, but glad for a change in conversation from my job prospects. "Well," my mother chimed in, exchanging a look with my father. "We thought it might be nice to have a mural on the main wall, something to brighten up the space." I nodded absently, not yet realizing what was coming. "And since you're such a talented artist," my father continued, "we thought you might want to take it on. Keep you busy while you're job hunting." I nearly choked on my water. "You want me to paint your basement?" "Just a small mural," my mother said, though her eyes didn't meet mine. "It would be good for you to have a project. You always did your best work when you had a clear goal." I thought about declining. After all, I needed to focus on finding a job, not painting my parents' basement. But the guilt trip came quickly. "Of course, if you're too busy," my father said, "we understand. We're already helping you out with a place to stay, rent-free. we wouldn't want to impose. The familiar weight of obligation settled on my shoulders. No, it's fine. I can do a small mural. It might be fun. The next day, I came downstairs to find my father unloading art supplies from his car. Expensive ones, professional-grade acrylics, brushes I couldn't have afforded on my own, drop cloths, and even a small scaffold. "Dad," I said, stunned by the quantity. "How much did all this cost?" "Don't worry about that," he said, waving away my concern. "Consider it an investment in our home, and in you getting back on your feet with a creative outlet." It was the first betrayal, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time. They had already planned this, down to the supplies they thought I would need. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment suggestion to keep me busy. This was premeditated. The basement greeted me with its perpetual chill and the distinct smell of concrete and lingering dampness. I flicked on the fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the gray walls. My parents had cleared the area near the largest wall, moving boxes and old furniture to create a workspace. So I was thinking something small. "Maybe in this corner," I said when my father joined me, pointing to a section about 5 feet square. He chuckled, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Oh, Maddie, we were thinking more comprehensive." From his pocket, he pulled a folded piece of paper that, when opened, revealed a detailed sketch of a landscape. It showed rolling hills, a winding river, a small village, and mountains in the distance. It was, essentially, a mural that would cover the entire 20-foot wall. "You drew this?" I asked, surprised by the detail. "A few years back," he nodded. "I've had this vision for quite some time. Never found the right person to bring it to life. Until your unemployed daughter showed up on your doorstep," I muttered. "What was that?" "Nothing. Dad, this is huge. It would take weeks, maybe months." "Well," he smiled, "it's not like you have anywhere else to be, right?" That stung. I tried again. "Maybe we could start with something smaller, just to see how it looks?" My mother chose that moment to appear at the top of the stairs. "Richard, is Maddie excited about the project?" "I was thinking we could host a little reveal party when it's done. Show off her talent to the neighbors." And just like that, I was trapped. The familiar dance of Peterson family dynamics unfolded. My reluctance met with guilt, manipulation, and eventually, my surrender. This wasn't about keeping me busy during my job search. This was about getting free professional-grade artwork for their home renovation. "Fine," I sighed. "I'll do the full mural." My father beamed. "That's my girl. Always knew you had it in you to do something meaningful with that art degree." Another barb, carefully disguised as a compliment. My graphic design degree had been a compromise. What I had wanted was to study fine arts at the prestigious Westfield Arts Academy, where I had been accepted with a partial scholarship. My parents had other ideas. "Art is a hobby, Madeline, not a career," my father had said. "Graphic design is practical. You can actually make a living doing that." So I went to the State University instead, majoring in graphic design with a minor in fine arts. My paintings and drawings were relegated to weekends and evenings, eventually fading away entirely as corporate deadlines took precedence. I spent the first day prepping the wall, cleaning it thoroughly, and applying a primer. My father hovered, offering unsolicited advice about the best techniques for painting on concrete, despite never having done it himself. My mother brought down sandwiches and iced tea, asking questions about my vision for the project and then suggesting alterations before I could fully answer. By the end of the first week, I had transferred a rough outline of the landscape to the wall. The physical labor was actually somewhat therapeutic, allowing me to channel my frustration into something tangible. But as I stepped back to evaluate my progress, my father appeared with a red pen and began circling areas he thought needed adjustment. "The mountains should be taller here," he said, marking directly on my work. "And I think the river should curve more dramatically in this section." "Dad, I can make those adjustments myself. You don't need to mark on it, just helping you see it from the viewer's perspective," he replied dismissively. The following Sunday, I came down to the basement to find my parents giving a tour to my aunt and uncle, who had dropped by after church. "Here's where Maddie is working her magic," my mother said proudly, as if the mural had been her idea all along. "It's coming along," I said awkwardly, still in my pajamas and not prepared for visitors. "It's so nice that you're able to help your parents while you're between jobs, my aunt said, with the special emphasis people reserve for uncomfortable truths. That evening, as I was searching job listings online, I heard my mother on the phone. Yes, she's painting the entire wall. No, I think she's enjoying having a purpose again. We're planning a little reveal party when it's finished. You'll have to come. The basement was no longer my workspace. It had become a showcase for my parents' generosity in giving me a chance to use my talents. My frustration grew, but so did my dependence. Every rejection email from potential employers pushed me further into the role my parents had created for me. The grateful, artistic daughter using her temporary setback to beautify their home. By the third week of the project, I had established a routine. I would spend mornings applying for jobs, afternoons painting, and evenings either continuing to paint or collapsing in exhaustion. The mural was taking shape. The mountains now had definition. The small village had tiny windows that caught the imaginary sunlight, and the river had the correct, dramatic curve my father had insisted upon. What wasn't in my routine was time for myself or space to breathe without parental oversight. Every brushstroke was evaluated, every color choice questioned. My father had taken to sitting in a folding chair at the far end of the basement, ostensibly reading but actually monitoring my progress. My mother would find excuses to come downstairs, bringing laundry to the washing machine, looking for old photo albums, checking for leaks after it rained. One Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I scrambled to answer it, hoping it was one of the dozens of companies I had applied to. Hello, this is Madeline Peterson. Maddie? It's Caitlin Reynolds. I heard you were back in town. Caitlin had been my closest friend in high school before our lives took different paths. She stayed in Mapleton while I went off to university. We had lost touch over the years, save for occasional holiday cards and social media likes. Caitlin, yes, I'm staying with my parents for a bit while I job hunt. We should catch up. Are you free for coffee tomorrow? The local coffee shop, Beans and Books, hadn't changed in the 9 years since I'd been a regular. The mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, and the smell of freshly ground coffee beans created an atmosphere of comforting familiarity. Caitlin waved from a corner table, her blonde hair now cut in a stylish bob rather than the long waves I remembered. You look exactly the same, she lied kindly, hugging me. So do you, I returned the polite falsehood. We both knew that nearly a decade had left its mark. After catching up on careers, hers as an elementary school teacher, relationships, she was engaged to her college boyfriend, and mutual acquaintances, Caitlin's expression grew more serious. So what's it really like being back home? Your mom mentioned at book club that you're painting their basement? I sighed, the weight of the past weeks suddenly heavy. It started as a keep busy project while I job hunt, but it's turned into this massive undertaking. They're planning a reveal party, for God's sake. Caitlin nodded knowingly. Classic Peterson parental pressure. Remember when they convinced you to join debate club instead of art club in junior year? Because it would look better on college applications, I quoted, making air quotes. And when they made you cancel your spring break trip to New York to visit art museums because they had already told everyone you were doing that internship at your dad's friend's company? I had almost forgotten that particular manipulation. God, you're right. It's always been like this, hasn't it? Maddie, from an outside perspective, your parents have always been controlling. They mean well, but they've never been able to see you separately from what they want for you. I started to defend them reflexively, the way I always had. They just want what's best for me, do they? Or do they want what makes them look best to their friends? What fits their idea of success? The question hung between us, uncomfortable but impossible to dismiss. For the first time, I allowed myself to see the pattern Caitlin was pointing out. The basement mural wasn't an isolated incident. It was the continuation of a lifelong pattern of control disguised as support. When I returned home that afternoon, I found my mother addressing invitations at the kitchen table. What are those? I asked, though I already knew. Just getting a head start on the reveal party invitations. We're thinking the first Saturday of next month. That gives you about 4 more weeks to finish, which should be plenty of time. Mom, you didn't ask me if that timeline works for my job search. What if I have interviews? What if I find a job by then? She looked genuinely puzzled. Well, you'd finish the mural first, of course. You wouldn't leave it incomplete. Before I could respond, My phone rang. It was my brother Nathan, calling from his law office in Indianapolis. "Hey, Maddie, just checking in. How's the parent situation?" "Overwhelming," I admitted, stepping onto the back porch for privacy. "They've got me painting the Sistine Chapel in their basement, while simultaneously questioning why I don't have a job yet." Nathan laughed, but there was understanding in it. "Yeah, that sounds about right. They did the same thing when I was studying for the bar exam. Remember that summer they decided their garage needed to be completely reorganized? And you had to do it because they were providing room and board while you studied?" "Exactly. Look, I know they're a lot to handle. They mean well, but they've never been good at boundaries." Coming from Nathan, the golden child who could do no wrong, this admission was validating. "How do you deal with it?" "Distance," he said simply. 3 hours away is just enough that they can't drop by unannounced, but close enough that they don't complain too much. After we hung up, I went to my childhood bedroom to search for a particular sketchbook. In high school, I had filled dozens of them with drawings and painting ideas. I remembered one specifically that contained designs for murals I had dreamed of creating someday. It wasn't in my desk drawer, nor in the closet. Finally, I checked the storage boxes under my bed and found several of my old sketchbooks, but not the one I was looking for. As I flipped through the ones I did find, I noticed pages had been removed from some of them. The art projects I had been most proud of, the ones my art teacher, Mrs. Landon, had praised most highly, were gone. Confused, I expanded my search to my parents' office, looking through their filing cabinets. In a folder labeled Madeline's School, I found the missing pages. Along with them was a letter I had never seen before, dated March 15th of my senior year in high school. "Dear Miss Peterson," it began. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for the Westfield Arts Academy Full Merit Scholarship for the upcoming academic year." My hands shook as I read the letter. A full scholarship, not the partial one I had been told about. And the date on the acceptance letter was 2 weeks before my parents had told me I hadn't received enough financial aid to make attendance feasible. They had received this letter and never shown it to me. They had made the decision for me, without my knowledge or consent. It was the second major betrayal, and it shook the foundation of everything I had believed about my life's path. The discovery of the hidden scholarship letter changed something fundamental in me. As I continued working on the basement mural, I began applying for jobs with renewed determination. Not just in Mapleton or nearby cities, but anywhere that might take me far from my parents' influence. I also started researching apartments, setting price alerts, and calculating exactly how much money I would need to escape. One afternoon, as I was adding detail to the small village in the mural, a man I didn't recognize came down the basement steps. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, smiling apologetically. "I'm Derek Williams. Your mother sent me down to take a look at your work." Derek was tall, with dark-rimmed glasses and paint-stained fingers. He looked to be in his early 30s. "My work?" I asked, confused by this stranger's presence. "I teach art at Mapleton High," he explained. "Your mother mentioned you were working on a mural and thought I might have some technical advice. Though," he added, "looking at the nearly completed landscape, it doesn't appear you need any help from me. This is remarkable work." It was the first genuine compliment I had received since starting the project. My parents' praise always came with suggestions for improvement. "Thank you," I said, brushing hair from my face and leaving a smudge of blue paint on my forehead, which made Derek smile. "I'm Maddie, I know. Your mother has told the entire teacher's lounge about her daughter, the artist." He studied the mural more closely. "Your perspective work is excellent. Have you considered applying for the Riverdale Artist Residency Program? They're accepting applications now for the fall session." Artist residency? The concept seemed so far removed from my current reality of painting my parents' basement that it was almost laughable. Derek pulled a brochure from his messenger bag. "It's a 6-month program. Studio space, stipend, culminating in an exhibition. I'm on the selection committee. You should apply." Before I could respond, there was a crash behind us. My mother had dropped a tray with iced tea glasses, sending liquid splashing across the newly painted lower section of the mural. "Oh no," she exclaimed, though her expression didn't match her words. "I'm so sorry, Maddie. I guess you'll have to touch that up." After Derek helped clean up the spill and left with a promise to email me details about the residency program, I confronted my mother. That wasn't an accident, was it? What are you talking about? She asked, avoiding my eyes as she mopped up the last of the tea. You didn't like that someone was admiring my work without your involvement. You didn't like that he was suggesting opportunities for me that you didn't orchestrate. Don't be ridiculous, she scoffed. It was an accident. And I don't know why that young man was filling your head with nonsense about residencies when you need to be focusing on finding a real job. The damaged section took an entire day to repair, pushing back my progress on the rest of the mural. But in the evenings, I began meeting with Derek at the high school art studio, where he helped me prepare a portfolio for the residency application. He taught me techniques to enhance my work, introduced me to new materials, and most importantly, treated me like a legitimate artist rather than someone playing at art. As April turned to May, rumors began circulating around town about my parents' basement project. Caitlin texted me one evening, "Just heard your mom telling Mrs. Henderson they're turning the basement into a home office for her interior design consultations, using your mural as a backdrop for client meetings." This was news to me. When I asked my mother about it at dinner, she waved away my concern. It's just a little side business I'm considering. Nothing definite yet. But the next day, I overheard her on the phone. Yes, the renovation is almost complete. We've had a lovely landscape mural done that will really showcase how space can be transformed. I can start meeting clients there as early as next month. That weekend, while my parents were at a neighbor's barbecue, I searched their office again and found detailed plans for Eleanor Peterson interior design, complete with business cards featuring a stylized version of my mural as the logo. They had been planning this business launch for months, long before I had lost my job and moved home. When they returned, I was waiting in the living room, the business plans spread out on the coffee table. "Were you going through our things?" my father demanded, his face reddening. "When were you going to tell me that my project was actually free labor for Mom's new business? That you were planning to profit from my work?" "Don't be dramatic, Madeline," my mother said. "We've given you a place to stay, bought all those expensive art supplies. We're not asking for anything in return, except a professional-grade mural that you're planning to use commercially." My father's expression hardened. "We just wanted to keep you busy, give you some purpose while you figure out your next steps. You've always been happier when you're working on our projects. They're projects. Not my art, not my career, not my choices. They're projects. I want to be compensated for my work if you're going to use it commercially," I stated firmly. My mother laughed dismissively. "We're already compensating you with room and board, Madeline. Don't be ungrateful." The conversation escalated into a full-blown argument, with years of resentment bubbling to the surface. When my father suggested that real artists don't need recognition, they just create because they have to, something inside me snapped. I packed an overnight bag and called Derek, who offered his couch until I could figure out my next move. As I was leaving, my father called after me. "You're acting like a child, Madeline. That mural isn't finished." "Neither am I, Dad," I replied, closing the door behind me. Derek's apartment above the local bookstore was small but filled with art, his own paintings, sculptures from friends, postcards from museums around the world. It felt more like home than my parents' house had in years. The next morning, after a night on his surprisingly comfortable couch, I called Caitlin, who insisted I move into her spare room until I got back on my feet. "It's just sitting empty until the wedding anyway," she said. "Brian is superstitious about us living together before then." 3 days into my self-imposed exile, my mother left a voicemail. "Maddie, this has gone on long enough. Your father and I are willing to forget your outburst if you'll come home and finish the project. We respect your work. We really do. We just want what's best for you." It was the same line they had used my entire life. When I called back, my father answered. "We need the mural completed by the end of the month," he said, without preamble. "Your mother has clients scheduled to view the space. I told you. I want to be paid for commercial use of my artwork." "Fine," he sighed. "We'll pay you a fair rate. Just come home and finish it." I agreed, but with conditions. I would complete the mural on my schedule, not theirs, and we would draw up a contract specifying my compensation and rights to the work. They reluctantly agreed. The same day I moved back home, Derek called with news that electrified me. The Mapleton Arts Council is holding a competition for local artists. The theme is Hidden Perspectives. First prize is $5,000 and a featured spot in the regional arts showcase. That's amazing, I said, already mentally sketching ideas. When are submissions due? June 15th. That gives you just under 6 weeks. As I hung up, another piece of news arrived via text from Caitlin. Did you know Amelia Bennett is back in town? Your mom invited her to your basement reveal party. Amelia Bennett, my mother's friend Vivian's daughter, who had attended the prestigious Westfield Arts Academy, likely with the scholarship that should have been mine. Amelia, whose mediocre art had been praised by my parents, while my own was dismissed as a hobby. Amelia, who now had a successful career as an illustrator in New York, with gallery shows and magazine features. When I mentioned the competition to my parents at dinner, their reaction was predictable. You don't have time for that, Maddie, my mother said dismissively. The basement needs to be ready for the party, and you should be focusing on your job search. I can manage both, I insisted. The competition could be a great opportunity for me professionally. Did Derek put you up to this? My father asked suspiciously. He seems to be filling your head with a lot of impractical ideas. He's encouraging me to pursue my passion, I countered. Something you and Mom never did. The argument ended as they always did, with me retreating to my room, seething with frustration but more determined than ever. The next day, my mother dropped her bombshell. I invited Amelia to come see the mural, she announced casually as I was preparing to go work on it. She's in town visiting her parents, and since she's had such success in the art world, I thought she might have some valuable feedback for you. You did what? I stared at her in disbelief, and she continued as if I hadn't spoken. She mentioned she might enter that little competition Derek told you about. Isn't that nice? You'll know someone else participating. Nice wasn't the word I would have chosen. When Amelia arrived later that day, she swept into the basement wearing designer clothes and an air of condescension. Maddie, darling, how quaint, she exclaimed, examining the mural. It's so traditional. Very hotel art, in the best possible way. She proceeded to offer suggestions that would completely change the character of the piece, which my mother noted down enthusiastically. When Amelia mentioned she was indeed entering the Arts Council competition, my mother practically gushed. Amelia has such a unique perspective, she told me after Amelia left. You should really consider her advice. Mom, she's competing against me. Why would she give me good advice? My mother looked genuinely confused. Amelia would never be anything but helpful. She's always been so supportive. That evening, my father delivered their ultimatum. Either finish the mural by their deadline, or they would hire someone else to complete it, probably Amelia, and paint over my work entirely. It's your choice, Maddie, he said, as if he were being reasonable. But we need that space ready for your mother's business launch. I agreed to their timeline, but inside, I made my own plan. I would work double time, painting their mural during the day, and creating my competition piece at night in Derek's classroom studio. It was exhausting, physically and emotionally, but also liberating. For the first time, I was creating art that was truly mine, answering to no one's vision but my own. My competition piece took shape slowly, an installation that contrasted confined spaces with moments of freedom, using materials and techniques I had never dared try before. Derek provided guidance without imposing his ideas, a refreshing change from my parents' constant direction. Caitlin became my confidant and cheerleader, bringing dinner to the studio on late nights and helping me transport materials. Even my brother Nathan stepped up, calling our parents to confront them about their treatment of me after I finally told him about the hidden scholarship letter. They're not bad people, Maddie, he said when he called to check on me afterward. But they've never been able to see past what they want for us to what we actually want for ourselves. As the deadline for both projects loomed closer, I overheard my mother on the phone one evening. Yes, Vivian Amelia is welcome to use the basement studio after the renovation is complete. It will be perfect for her visit this summer. Maddie? Oh, she'll be fine with it. She'll probably have a job by then anyway. You know how she is. Never really committed to her art the way Amelia has been. It was the fourth betrayal, planning to give Amelia access to a workspace they had never offered to me, their own daughter. The basement mural was completed 3 days before the reveal party. I had worked furiously, sometimes 14 hours a day, to meet my parents' deadline while still creating my competition piece. The landscape now spanned the entire wall, with mountains that seemed to recede into an infinite distance, a river that caught the light as if it were actually flowing, and a village with tiny details that revealed themselves only upon close inspection. What my parents didn't know was that I had incorporated hidden elements into the mural, symbols, and images that represented my journey and the truths I had discovered. A tiny artist studio in one of the village buildings with a figure painting at an easel. A path leading away from the village toward the distant mountains, symbolizing escape and freedom, and most significantly, barely noticeable within the pattern of the river's flow. The words "I was here" in a script so subtle it appeared to be merely ripples in the water. The day of the party arrived with a flurry of activity. My mother had hired caterers, arranged flowers, and transformed the basement into a showcase for her new interior design business. The mural was dramatically lit, with track lighting my father had installed, highlighting exactly the elements my mother wanted potential clients to notice. Guests began arriving at 7, my parents' friends, local business owners, potential clients, and of course, Amelia Bennett and her parents. Amelia circled the room in a designer dress, air-kissing acquaintances and commenting on the charming provincial atmosphere of Mapleton. I stood awkwardly near my mural, accepting compliments and deflecting questions about my career plans with vague responses. Derek arrived, bringing a supportive smile and a subtle thumbs up that meant more to me than all the polite praise from my parents' friends. As the evening progressed, I noticed something disturbing. When guests asked about the mural, my mother would respond with our vision, and we wanted to create, rarely mentioning my role beyond Maddie helped bring it to life. Once, I overheard Amelia explaining to a local business owner how she had consulted on the perspective work, a complete fabrication. The most surreal moment came when Mrs. Henderson, my mother's book club friend, asked Amelia what techniques she had used for the mountain shadows. "Oh, I suggested a layering approach," Amelia replied smoothly, as if she had anything to do with the creation of the mural. More disturbing was that my mother, standing nearby, didn't correct her. After the guests departed, leaving only my parents, Amelia and her parents, and a few close family friends, my father raised a toast to Eleanor's new venture, and to this beautiful space that will surely inspire her clients. Noticeably absent was any acknowledgement of my contribution. When the Bennetts left, promising to continue the conversation about Amelia using the studio space this summer, I finally confronted my parents. "You didn't once publicly acknowledge that I created that mural," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed anger. "You let Amelia take credit for techniques she had nothing to do with." "Don't be petty, Madeline," my mother sighed. "Everyone knows you painted it. We didn't think we needed to make a big announcement. And what's this about Amelia using the basement as a studio this summer? She's only in town for a few months," my father explained, as if that justified everything. "It seems a waste to have the space sitting empty." "Empty? I could use it as a studio. I've never had a dedicated space for my art in this house." "Well, you'll probably have a job by then," my mother said dismissively. "Besides, Amelia is a professional artist. She needs the space for her actual work. And what do you think I've been doing for the past 3 months? Finger painting?" The argument escalated quickly, voices rising as years of resentment poured out. In the heat of the moment, my mother let slip the final betrayal. "Honestly, Madeline, we never intended to pay you for the mural. It was a family project, something to keep you busy while you got back on your feet. Real artists don't expect to be paid for every little thing they create." "A family project?" I was incredulous. "That you're using commercially for Mom's business? That you're letting Amelia take partial credit for?" "You're being unreasonable," my father interjected. "We've given you everything. A place to stay, expensive art supplies, connections to people like the Bennetts, who could actually help your career if you weren't so stubborn." Something in me broke free at that moment, the last chain of obligation and guilt that had kept me tethered to their expectations. "You've given me everything except the freedom to choose my own path," I said, my voice suddenly calm. "You hid a full scholarship from me because it didn't fit your plan for my life. You've dismissed my art as a hobby while praising Amelia's mediocre work because it came with the prestige you wanted. You've used my talent when it benefited you but never supported my dreams." My mother's face had gone pale. My father looked as if I had physically struck him. Into the silence, my brother Nathan, who had arrived late and been standing in the doorway, finally spoke. "She's right, you know. You did the same to me, just in different ways. The difference is I chose the path you wanted anyway. Maddie never did, and you've punished her for it her entire life." I left that night, packing everything I could fit into my car. As I was leaving, I heard my father call after me, his voice breaking. "Madeline, please. We just wanted what's best for you." I paused at the door. "No, Dad. You wanted what was best for your idea of me. There's a difference." The 2 weeks leading up to the arts competition were a blur of activity. I moved permanently into Caitlin's spare room, working late into the night to perfect my competition piece at Derek's classroom studio. My installation, titled Confined Perspectives, incorporated elements of traditional painting with three-dimensional structures that invited viewers to literally change their perspective as they moved around the piece. Derek had been an unwavering support, offering technical advice, emotional encouragement, and occasionally food when I forgot to eat. Our relationship had evolved from mentor and student to something deeper, though neither of us had put a name to it yet. One evening, as I was adding final touches to my installation, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Madeline Peterson?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, this is she. This is Sandra Knowles from Horizon Design Group in Portland. We received your portfolio and were very impressed with your work. We'd like to schedule an interview for our senior graphic designer position." I nearly dropped my phone. Horizon Design was one of the most prestigious firms in the Pacific Northwest, known for blending traditional design with fine art elements, exactly the direction I had always wanted to take my career. "I'd be very interested," I managed to say professionally, while doing a silent dance around the studio. "When were you thinking? Could you be available next Thursday? We'd cover your travel expenses, of course." As I hung up, Derek entered the classroom with coffee and a smile that faltered when he saw my expression. "Bad news?" he asked, setting down the cups. "The opposite. I just got an interview with Horizon Design in Portland." I explained the opportunity, watching his face for a reaction. "Maddie, that's amazing. They're incredible. Their work on the Pacific Arts Festival campaign last year was groundbreaking. It would mean moving to Portland," I said, searching his eyes. He took my hand, paint-stained fingers intertwining with mine. "We'll figure it out. This is too good an opportunity to pass up." The day of the arts competition arrived with perfect early summer weather. The Mapleton Community Center had been transformed into a gallery space, with local artists' work displayed throughout the main hall. My installation had been set up in a corner that allowed for the movement and interaction it required. As I arranged the final elements, I spotted Amelia across the room, directing assistance in the placement of her submission, a series of digital prints mounted on acrylic, technically impressive but emotionally sterile. My parents arrived shortly before judging began. I had not spoken to them since the night of the reveal party, though they had left numerous voicemails and texts alternating between apologies and justifications for their behavior. Seeing them enter, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the artistic crowd, I felt a complex mixture of resentment and pity. They approached tentatively, my father speaking first. "Your piece looks interesting, Maddie. Very innovative." "Thanks," I replied, the single word containing all my wariness. "We wanted to wish you luck," my mother added, "and to let you know we're proud of you for putting yourself out there." Before I could respond, the Bennetts arrived, Amelia immediately commanding attention in an outfit that looked more appropriate for a New York gallery opening than a small-town competition. "Madeline," she nodded coolly. "Interesting concept. Very raw." She moved on to greet my parents warmly, the three of them falling into easy conversation while I stood awkwardly alone, until Derek appeared at my side. "Don't let them get to you," he murmured. "The judges are looking for authenticity and emotional impact, not technical perfection without soul." The judging process took over an hour, during which I alternated between nervous pacing and forced small talk with community members. Finally, the head judge, a respected artist from the State University, took the small podium. Art is, at its core, about perspective, how we see the world and how the world sees us, she began. This year's theme, Hidden Perspectives, challenged our artists to reveal what often remains concealed. "We've seen remarkable interpretations today," She announced the honorable mentions and third place, building tension as she approached the top prizes. When Amelia's name was called for second place, I saw her face flash with disappointment before composing itself into a gracious smile. And our first place winner, whose work Confined Perspectives impressed our judges with its technical skill, emotional resonance, and innovative approach to the theme, Madeline Peterson. The room erupted in applause. In shock, I made my way to the podium to accept the award, a certificate, the promised check, and an invitation to the regional showcase. As I turned to face the crowd, I saw Derek beaming with pride, Caitlin jumping up and down, and my parents standing still, expressions unreadable. After the ceremony, as people milled about examining the winning entries more closely, a woman approached me with a business card. Madeline, I'm Jennifer Lowell, owner of Riverfront Gallery. Your piece is exactly the kind of fresh perspective we're looking to feature. I'd like to offer you exhibition space this fall. Stunned by this second piece of good fortune, I could only nod and promise to call her the following week. As Jennifer walked away, my parents approached. Congratulations, my father said, his voice gruff with an emotion I couldn't identify. We're very proud of you. Thank you, I replied, still maintaining emotional distance. That gallery owner, my mother began, then seemed to reconsider whatever she had been about to say. She obviously recognizes your talent. In the awkward silence that followed, I found myself saying, I have an interview with Horizon Design in Portland next week. Portland? My father's eyebrows rose. That's quite far. It's a senior designer position. They'd be blending my graphic design background with fine art, which is what I've always wanted. My mother nodded slowly. I hope you get it, if that's what will make you happy. It was perhaps the first time she had ever said those words without adding a but or a subtle redirection toward what she thought would make me happy. As they turned to leave, my father paused. Madeline, about the mural. We were wrong not to give you proper credit and compensation. We'll have a check for you tomorrow, if you'll accept it. It wasn't a full apology, but coming from Richard Peterson, it was close. I nodded, not quite ready to fully forgive, but taking a step in that direction. As they walked away, I overheard my mother say to Amelia, who had been hovering nearby, I'm afraid the basement studio won't be available this summer after all. Family circumstances have changed. 6 months later, I stood in my Portland apartment, sunlight streaming through the large windows that had been a major selling point when I signed the lease. At 27, I finally had a space that was truly mine, decorated with my own art and furnished according to my own taste. My job at Horizon Design had exceeded my expectations, allowing me to blend my technical design skills with the artistic expression I had always craved. Weekends were reserved for my personal projects and the community art classes I taught at the local community center. My students ranged from children discovering art for the first time to retirees finally pursuing long-delayed passions. Teaching them reminded me of what Derek had taught me, that art isn't about perfection, but about authentic expression. Derek himself had become a constant in my life, despite the distance. He had visited monthly since I moved, and we were exploring the possibility of him relocating to Portland the following year. The art programs in the city had several openings coming up that matched his qualifications. Caitlin remained my strongest link to Mapleton, calling weekly with town gossip and updates on her newly married life. She had visited twice already, filling my apartment with her boisterous laugh and unflagging enthusiasm. My relationship with my parents was the slowest to heal, built on cautious conversations and carefully maintained boundaries. They had paid me fairly for the mural, which now served as the backdrop for my mother's modestly successful interior design business. More importantly, they had begun to show a tentative respect for my choices, even when those choices took me far from their influence. The invitation to my first gallery showing had been difficult to send, knowing it might reopen wounds barely beginning to scar over. Their RSVP came surprisingly quickly. They would attend, flying in for the weekend. When the day arrived, I stood nervously among my displayed works, which included a reimagined version of my competition piece and several new explorations of the themes that had emerged during my basement period, as I now called it. Derek squeezed my hand reassuringly as the first visitors began to arrive. My parents entered tentatively, looking both proud and uncomfortable in the Portland gallery scene. My father wore a suit that seemed too formal. My mother a dress I recognized from special occasions back home. "This is quite impressive, Maddie," my father said after viewing the collection. The awkwardness in his voice couldn't completely mask the genuine pride. "Your use of negative space in this series is remarkable," my mother added, surprising me with the technical observation. "Have you considered how these techniques might translate to larger installations?" It was a stilted conversation, full of careful navigations around past hurts. But it was also the first time they had engaged with my art as actual art, not as a hobby or a stepping stone to something practical. As the evening proceeded, I introduced them to my colleagues and friends, watching them gradually relax into this glimpse of my new life. After the event, over dinner at my favorite local restaurant, my father cleared his throat in the way he always did before difficult conversations. "Maddie, I owe you an apology," he said, the words clearly challenging for him. A real one. Not the half-hearted explanations I've been giving. My mother reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but resting hers nearby. "We thought we were protecting you from disappointment. Artists struggle, and we wanted to spare you that. But in trying to guide you away from one kind of pain, we caused another." "The scholarship letter?" I said, the betrayal still raw despite the months that had passed. My father nodded, his expression pained. "It was wrong. We convinced ourselves we were acting in your best interest, but we were really just controlling you, forcing you into a path we understood. We were afraid," my mother admitted. "Afraid of you struggling, afraid of you moving too far away, afraid of you resenting us if the art career didn't work out." But all our fears came true anyway, just in different ways. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Too much had happened for all wounds to heal in one conversation. But it was a beginning. An acknowledgement of wrongs done, and a tentative step toward a new kind of relationship. The mural in my parents' basement had been covered over with drywall as part of the renovation, just as planned. But my mother had taken photographs first, documenting my work in detail, including the hidden elements I'd incorporated. She had framed one of these photos and brought it as a gift, which now hung in my hallway, not because I wanted to remember the project itself, but as a reminder of how far I had come. Sometimes, the projects others force upon us reveal what we should have been doing all along. My parents' attempt to keep me busy had instead set me free, pushing me to confront not just their expectations, but my own hesitations and fears. The basement had been both my prison and my catalyst, the mural both my burden and my liberation. Life is a continuous work in progress, much like art itself. We sketch our outlines, apply our base colors, add details and depth, and sometimes paint over sections that didn't turn out as planned. The beauty emerges not despite these revisions, but because of them, each layer adding richness and meaning to the whole. So what projects have others forced upon you that ultimately changed your path? Have you experienced the strange liberation that sometimes comes from unwanted obligations? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that sometimes. Our greatest growth comes from our most difficult constraints. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, the canvas of your life is yours to paint, even if others sometimes try to hold the brush.